The Kaleidoscopes method books are designed for violin teachers who are looking for power and versatility in their teaching materials, and especially for teachers who have been wishing for enjoyable and age-appropriate, but also technically rigorous materials for their youngest students. As teachers, we grow accustomed to many of the challenges we face day in and day out in lessons, and we may easily assume that they are inherent to teaching violin. Sometimes we may have the sensation that we are missing some piece of the puzzle, but after years of incremental progress, it seems as though no big breakthroughs are forthcoming. Kaleidoscopes offers a genuine breakthrough in violin teaching. Teaching is still an art, and your students will still have to practice 3 octave scales. But if you would love to never remind a child to use your low 2, keep listening. If you want to never again say your violin is drooping, you're in the right place. Kaleidoscopes will remove many of the invisible barriers to your teaching and allow you to achieve results that may seem like an impossible fantasy. For example, what if you could ask your 5-year-old violin student to choose a song, figure out the harmony from scratch, and play it on the piano with both hands? What if you could assign your 6-year-old student 3 new songs and have them return to their next lesson with the notes and rhythms fully mastered? What if you could say to your 7-year-old student, "This week, I want you to learn the first movement of the Vivaldi Concerto for 2 violins"? What if all of these things were an ordinary part of your teaching experience? Kaleidoscopes builds upon the legacy of Suzuki, but removes many barriers that as teachers we may take for granted. Kaleidoscopes was begun out of commitment to take apart violin teaching thread by thread and keep only those things that create the best possible learning for each and every child. In the process of developing the Kaleidoscope sequence, so many improvements have been made to the traditional teaching sequence that it would be impossible to list them in a short video. Each tiny improvement represents between 2 to 6 weeks of faster progress for your students. Maria Montessori realized that the most powerful force available to teachers doesn't come from teachers at all. It comes from the child in front of us. Contrary to the traditional thinking of her day, children are not empty vessels to be filled with information. Instead, they are constantly bringing their own ideas and constructing knowledge as they interact with the world. This doesn't mean we should give each child a set of blocks and hope they eventually figure out multiplication. Instead, Montessori teachers strive to create a learning environment that actively guides a child toward insights and discoveries. Through engagement and inquiry, the child experiences each discovery as coming from within themselves. This process empowers children to generate their own learning, encourages creativity and critical thinking, and gives them a sense of ownership in their own knowledge. Just as in the Montessori classroom, the Kaleidoscopes curriculum provides an exquisitely detailed instructional sequence, while meantime ensuring that children have the consistent experience of making choices, figuring things out, and generating their own learning with the teacher's guidance. For example, it's the violin teacher who initiates transposing hot cross buns up a step from D major into E major, but it's the child who gets to make the discovery that the song sounds a little sad. This child will always remember G sharp as the first secret note they discovered, and it is almost as exciting as finding a secret passageway in the attic. As the child transposes their familiar songs into E major, they love the process of puzzling out where the notes are and choosing which song to try next. Movable do solfege offers children a musical language that is immediately fascinating to them. Children as young as 3 years old naturally gravitate towards the solfege words of each song. Just as certain people can see a particular color when a note is played, solfege illuminates hidden patterns in the music and makes these patterns more tangible, especially as the child begins to play piano and discovers the meaning behind the sounds. Children and parents easily learn the solfege words and use them to learn songs at home. With note reading delayed in this delightfully musical way, you, the teacher, can spend your students' first year of lessons focused almost entirely on excellent technique and beautiful posture. You'll be able to introduce sophisticated technical and musical concepts much sooner because notes and fingerings are being capably handled by the student and their parent. This doesn't mean that Kaleidoscopes delays note reading. Rather, musical literacy is being separately introduced in its own well-structured and discovery-based sequence. As countless Montessori parents have discovered, when children are encouraged to learn independently, they experience a sense of delight in learning and ownership in their own knowledge. By comparison with traditionally trained students, Kaleidoscope students engage in critical thinking and problem solving at an earlier age. They take initiative and trust themselves to discover patterns and master challenges. Because they feel empowered in the learning experience, they enjoy practicing and do more of it. Your Kaleidoscope students will seem more confident, sophisticated, and passionate because Kaleidoscopes is leveraging their natural intelligence to a degree unavailable in typical methods of teaching. Kaleidoscopes follows the principles of Kodai in developing note reading and music literacy. Kodai discovered that children comprehend musical concepts in a very different way from adults. For example, an adult might think that a step should be the starting point for ear training, but a child can more easily retain and recognize the sound of falling third, rain, rain, go away, which is the first tonal pattern sung by children in almost every culture. While the Suzuki approach advocates learning by ear, in reality, the Suzuki songs themselves are tonally too advanced for most children to easily locate on the violin fingerboard. By combining the more pedagogically sound aspects of the Suzuki philosophy with the Kodai approach to ear training, the result is powerfully synergistic. Kaleidoscope students move fluidly between keys, and because they are tonally well-grounded, they typically make instant corrections when they play a note that is outside of the correct key. By their third year, the typical Kaleidoscope student is playing up to 3 sharps and flats with very little effort, and can transpose songs in a minute or two, even into relatively difficult keys. As violin teachers, the parents we work with are tremendously dedicated. Kaleidoscopes empowers parents with information that is concise, relevant, and timely. Your parents will find clear details that help them understand their children's music, movement videos that help them make accurate posture corrections during the first year, and videos of individual songs that help them discover and learn alongside their child. Kaleidoscopes Book 1 features beautiful watercolor illustrations that encourage young children to fall in love with each song. Some illustrations bring animal characters humorously to life. Others evoke a world of fantasy and magic. Still others inspire detailed engagement with sights, sounds, and smells rooted deep in the historical past. The harmonically rich and sparkling piano settings and soprano singing make the Book 1 CD delightful for even the parents to listen to over and over again.
But you may wander, 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 but you may wander everywhere.
One of the simplest but most powerful improvements in Kaleidoscopes is the length and pacing of the songs. Kaleidoscopes Book 1 songs are much shorter than those in the Suzuki books, so each song can be mastered in just a few weeks. This is especially important for very young children, for whom being able to learn 5 songs in 2 months is a much more meaningful accomplishment than gradually improving one song over the same time period. Shorter songs means that your students are never playing any song so long that it becomes stale or boring. They will feel as though they are progressing at a much faster pace, and in reality they do, because feeling excited and stimulated by a wider repertoire encourages harder work and longer practice sessions. Since a child's voice is their most natural and intuitive musical instrument, folk songs tap into a deep well of innate musicality. Kodai was a passionate advocate that children have only the finest musical materials, and the simplicity of folk songs belies their musical richness. A song will be preserved for hundreds of years only if it is of the highest quality. Besides being a tiny musical masterpiece, each folk song connects children to their family and culture in a rich and meaningful way. Bach will not mind waiting until the child has learned to play in tune, and beginning with child-friendly materials creates less friction in the learning process, so that ultimately, progress is much faster. Children engage with each of their songs in a variety of ways before playing the song on the violin. They may sing the song while keeping a steady beat, follow the pictorial notation along with the recording, sing the song with the movements from the Violin Blocks video series, examine and ask questions about the illustration, and play the song on the piano with each hand individually and both together. When the child is finally ready to play the song on the violin, they've already had an opportunity to fully digest the rhythms and note patterns. Playing the song on the violin is not a laborious puzzle of bowings and fingerings even in the beginning. Instead, they enjoy finding the familiar patterns on the violin fingerboard, and the new challenge is learning to manipulate the bow and coordinate the bow with their fingers. Very early in the process, the child is free enough to experience genuinely making music. As a teacher, it's critically important to feel at home with the materials you're using. Between students' performances, family, and other obligations, we know how valuable your time is. For this reason, we've created a series of concise, useful video tutorials to make the process of learning kaleidoscopes clear and easy. The initial overview series will be valuable to you regardless of what teaching method you might ultimately use. Topics such as practice games, lesson structure, parent training, instructional sequencing, and emotional mirroring will help you increase your overall teaching effectiveness. The Book 1 training will go into detail about repertoire, posture, and technique. You will learn how transposition is used as a tool to awaken students' curiosity and begin unlocking the puzzle of the violin fingerboard. Many Book 1 topics will also be useful to you regardless of the materials you're using. For example, how to build violin posture, a simple and fail-proof method for getting a perfect bow hold in just one lesson, how to train flexibility in the bow hand, and why it's important to teach legato within the first month of playing. Also in the Book 1 training, you'll discover that starting in third position makes it much easier for young children to support the weight of the violin and avoid collapsing the wrist. Meanwhile, the child also becomes more comfortable with their fourth finger, since it's used in the half step from mi to fa, where it is well supported by the third finger. Kaleidoscopes Book 1 is designed to meet the unique needs of young children and can be used as a prequel to any method book. Books 2, 3, and 4 do not require any explanation for teachers to understand and use. And while they are the natural segue from Kaleidoscopes Book 1, they can also be used by any teacher as supplemental material to other method books. We hope you will enjoy Kaleidoscopes and find it to be a tool that allows you to express yourself fully as a violin teacher. Our commitment is to enable you to be free to enjoy teaching and to help you give your students an experience of delight and discovery as they learn to play violin.